我叫冷子峰，我要报名参加振宇学院的击剑队。
学院派来捣乱的吧？
不是，相信我，我就是你们一直找的击剑天才。给我一个机会，我绝不会让你们失望的。这小子还真能吹啊！我是认真的。你放下，放下！放下！
冷子峰，这不是刚刚在击剑馆的人吗？
他刚刚在击剑馆。
对啊。
我得去找他。
不是校长，我已经把他赶走了。
你把他赶走干嘛呢？去把他找回来呀！快去呀！
哦。
教练，
怎么样？找到没？
没找到。
你们呢？
没找到。
真是，这会儿跑哪儿去了？
第1个月，你是怎么学会死亡华尔兹的？我跟杨岩学的，不小心成功了1次，这打败邓尔豪完全是运气。那里面有运气成分存在。你也是难得一见的好苗子，既让奥盛学院多一个人才，不如让你留在我们振宇学院。只要你能够通过体育特长生的专项测试以及文化考试，振宇学院会给你全额奖学金。
I do have to say, the fact that he knows that that point was based off of luck, that's accurate. All beginners have that advantage. They move in rather unpredictable ways and choose unpredictable actions, and occasionally it is enough to throw off more experienced fencers and result in a point. The thing about this that is not true is, first of all, that would never happen often enough to beat someone who is significantly more experienced than the beginning fencer. It will happen usually once or twice, maybe 3 times about, but the score is to 5 or sometimes to 15. It depends on what part of the tournament you're in. So it wouldn't happen very often. And the thing is, even though they're unpredictable, a lot of those moves are telegraphed, simply because it takes a long time for fencers to really learn how to not give away the fact that they're about to do something, especially if it's a type of attack. So it could happen once, but it is very unlikely for it to happen again. So yes, luck can play a factor, especially to a beginner, but it's never very big. The second thing is that this move they call the death waltz, that's not a real thing, but it's very similar to a type of attack known as a flunge. And the thing is, the flunge is difficult enough that no one can do it on accident. The thing is, it's so close to falling that if you were to do it on accident, you would just fall. And the thing is, you are not allowed to get a touch after falling. It's actually a cardable offense. If you are fencing and then you fall and then you try to, whether it's on purpose or by accident, try to get the touch even while you're falling, like it's clear that even though you extended and hit your opponent, and if you were the only one to do so, if you were still falling, you clearly weren't in control and, you were surrendering to gravity, then even if your attack did arrive, the touch would be annulled and you would get a warning. So there's no way that it can happen on accident. If it was any other type of attack, almost any other type of attack, if it was an extension or an advanced lunge or just a regular lunge, if it happened at a time that someone thought, oh, that's weird, why didn't the more experienced fencer get it, that would be possible due to luck and unpredictability of the beginning fencer, but considering it's this type of attack, considering the nature of it, it's not possible.
可能有段时间打不了拳喽，因为他现在转变道路，学开始。
你怎么那么多话？是学习一些新的格斗技巧，比如跆拳道、截拳道、空手道。
Something interesting to note, they mentioned one of the martial arts as Jeet Kune Do, the martial art that Bruce Lee invented. There actually are some fencing maneuvers in Jeet Kune Do. As far as I know, I'm not a total expert in it, but from what I understand, Bruce Lee took two main concepts from fencing. He took something that is used mostly in epee, called the stop hit. It's a type of counterattack. In terms of using it for a fist, it doesn't have much power, but it has no tell, which means it's not telegraphed. You don't pull back or anything like that. It's a straight attack from your guard straight out to the opponent. So it's not very powerful, but it's fast, and it's difficult to tell that it's even coming, if not impossible. The other thing that he borrowed was apparently the fencing stance, and then altered it slightly, because the fencing stance, the on-guard stance, is very good for maintaining balance and moving back and forth very quickly. But it had to be adapted so that the fighter could move in different directions as well. So as I understand it, they sort of changed the position of the feet and I think made the stance wider. But other than that, it was based off of the fencing stance. And I think the main thing they kept was the fact that fencers sit down very low on their legs. It's difficult to learn in the beginning, but it really allows you to move very quickly, react to so much stuff without really having to worry about momentum, which means that you're able to react to pretty much anything at a moment's notice.
学习的挺快嘛。
多谢夸奖。谢谢。够了吧？再来最后一站，怎么样
？Okay, first things first, they're in an area that is nearly not long enough. A small little enclosure like that, that's fine for drills and stuff like that, but if you're going to be open fencing and practicing a full bout, then you want the whole area. So it's difficult to tell, but that looks like they're using a good third of what they actually need. They don't have really a whole lot of room, which segues into the next point. Fencers may have this kind of exchange, at least a fraction of it, but particularly for saber fencers, it's mostly done with their feet. There's not a whole lot of blade work going on. The reason for this is because, well, for one, it's very fast, but also because the entire length of the blade can score, and there's no pressure needed to set it off because you can use the entire length. They didn't have a way to have the whole blade be some sort of weight sensor, so it's just conductivity, which means a single electron can set it off. And there's enough target area that usually this sort of exchange does not happen with the blades, it happens with the feet. I realize that's not very cinematic, but that's the reality of it. The second thing is, even though they're keeping it very close to the other person in order to make it very dramatic and look like sword fighting instead of actual fencing, half the time they're ignoring priority. Priority constantly jumps between two fencers, whether they're doing it with their feet or their hands. It depends on who is attacking and who is defending. And whether or not you're attacking or defending is totally reliant on not just what your feet are doing, but also what your blade and what your opponent is doing. There are several parts in this sequence where they attack 2 or I think even 3 times in a row, whereas the very first attack that did not arrive would have transferred priority over to the other person. if they had taken advantage of it. The only way that your first attack would not arrive and your second attack would actually arrive with priority if you attacked twice in a row is if your opponent did not move. But the thing is, they are given a lot more time than what's going on here in order to actually gain that priority. So there's a concept known as fencing time and also tempo. They're kind of the same thing. It's basically like the flow of a bout, sort of the time it takes to do things. Fencing actions are basically just anything that a fencer will do, and they get broken down into that time. So one simple attack will be one action, and it will be done in one beat of the time. So whenever an attack ends, whether they fall short or it gets parried, the other fencer that did not get hit is given one beat to respond. Because then otherwise, if it's really anything less than that, then that starts getting into the area where basically you're expecting someone to not be human. The fencing time occasionally in very specific circumstances doesn't look like it would make sense, but it's sort of timed to what feels natural to do to a person. So that's why it exists. If your opponent takes more than one beat to respond, then the priority goes back to the fencer who is now attacking for the second time in a row. But that's a concept that they're ignoring entirely. There seems to be no real concept of priority or fencing time here. They're just kind of waving their blades at each other and trying to make contact. Now, for this girl getting injured in that fashion, first of all, that's unrealistic. The blades are designed so that this kind of thing specifically does not happen. If that actually happened like that, a thrust with that much force behind it, the blade would bend significantly, and as a result, the person would not get hurt. For what I saw there, a lot of the fencing was even more unrealistic. Not too much worse than what they've done in the past, but it still wasn't that great. But also there wasn't a whole lot in it. I would say for this episode, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It looks like they're getting worse at their representation. So that's not a good sign. We'll see what happens in the future. So that's the end of that. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Bye.